vaccination, and then you submit some diagnostics. But even those diagnostics are going to take time. So most of the time we don't really know why they go into failure. They just go into failure, and you're presented with a patient that has clinical signs of acute renal failure. And so let's start there. What would be the clinical signs of acute renal failure? Very vague, right? I mean, ethylene glycol is a beast on its own, so I'm going to put it here so I don't get distracted by that. But what would be the signs of acute renal failure? God forbid anyone has had acute renal failure here. But you get very nauseous. Yeah? You get very lethargic. You start shutting down. You just want to go into a quiet room and just go to sleep forever. And not from depression, but from feeling crappy. You might increase your water intake initially, and then eventually you stop drinking water because you're nauseous. You might urinate in excess amount if a toxin was what caused you to be in acute renal failure, but essentially, at some point, eventually you're going to be oliguric, meaning produce less urine when your kidneys start shutting down. So changes in urination, changes in drinking can go up and down. There are a couple of reasons, but the uremic toxin, right, will go into the chemoreceptor trigger zone in your brain and lead to, it's almost like you get intoxicated by your own wastes. Yeah, and you get nauseous by that. The second reason is that gastrin is that hormone that makes you produce, digest food in the stomach. That enzyme has to be excreted by the kidney, just like amylase and lipase. And if your GFR drops, that enzyme then accumulates. You're hypergastremic, which means that you have a lot of hydrochloric acid in your stomach. So two good reasons to be very nauseous with azotemia. And this, by the way, it's called uremia, right? Uremia are the clinical signs of an azotemic patient. But they're very vague. It won't be like, maybe a human will say, hey, my back hurts, because the kidneys are kind of retroperitoneal, right? But a dog or cat will tell you that. So it's got to be like history, potential exposure to a nephrotoxic compound or to an organism, and signal memory. So let's choose. Ethylene glycol is fairly common, unfortunately. Antifreeze, okay? They put a dye on it so it fluoresces. It's a cool thing. So initially you're going to get signs related with the ethylene glycol, meaning the ethylene glycol is going to get metabolized. I'm going to show you this, hopefully. There it is. So ethylene glycol gets ingested, right? And then you have this enzyme that allows you not to be drunk. The same enzyme, so you can feed alcohol to this enzyme, and this is the enzyme responsible for breaking down alcohol into less toxic compounds for your CNS. But in this case, you ingest a lot of ethylene glycol, so you overwhelm this enzyme, so you end up with metabolic byproducts of ethylene glycol, okay? And one of them is unfortunately calcium oxalate. This is a problem, right? This gets precipitated in your tubules and it plugs them up. No wonder. All of these acids are a huge problem, right? What would they lead to? Metabolic acidosis. And I'm not talking like a little acidosis, I'm talking like severe acidosis. Like I am dying of acidosis. Okay? And then the ethylene glycol itself, because it feeds this enzyme, it serves as an alcohol for the dogs, so they get drunk. And it's not a happy drunk. It's like they're miserable. So you can track the clinical signs by, first they get drunk, and they act drunk. Then they act very sick, and they start vomiting and puking, and then they stop making urine. Make sense? So that's the stage 1, stage 2, and 3. Most of the time, by the time you see them, they usually are in some degree of renal failure, unfortunately. And it's just by asking the owner, hey, could have been this, could have been that. But if the owner brings it to you, you know, hey, I just got the puppy drinking, lapping up the ethylene glycol, and it's within an hour of the ingestion, you can get to work, and you're going to be a lot more successful. So let's go by treatment. But first, what are we going to see? I mean, if you catch them really early, your analysis will be very boring, right? But most of the time, you're going to catch them with their renal failure, so you get isostenuria, you get some protein glucose in the blood, and you get the acidotic urine, right? Makes sense? And then in the sediment, you might start seeing the calcium oxalate monohydrate crystals. This guy. If you see that, you have to have a very serious conversation with the owner. This is not going to end up well. And you can see like the calcifications, like how yellowish or whitish it gets. See them there? See here are the tubules that you see the tubules get clogged with. This is fat in the renal pelvis, so it's here. This is abnormal, and this is the tubules. So there is an ethylene glycol assay that you can do in the serum. The problem with that test is that, look at the initial reaction, go back to it, or initial chemical reaction. This is very fast. So by the time you see them, they don't have any ethylene glycol in their blood. They have calcium oxalate and other acids. So you might miss it, you might get a false negative result, unless you catch them really soon. So I would run that test within like 8 hours of exposure. After that, I'm going to look for the crystals in the urine, right? Probably, rather than do the test, because the test could be negative and we're like, oh, we're out of the woods. Not really, it's just that everything's metabolized. So I'm not going to talk specifically about each thing. I'm just going to highlight the key things that you can see with ethylene glycol. So we talked about doing the test, right? We can do that. We talked about the urine, looking at the crystals. We talked about always doing a chemistry, assessing for BUN, creatinine, and phosphorus, right? Plus or minus calcium too. And then we have this thing called the osmolar gap. You guys heard of that before? Probably the only reason you would need to run an osmolar gap ever. So basically, I'm not going to have you memorize it, but you can calculate your osmolarity in your plasma with these 3 compounds. Sodium is the main driver of osmolarity. That's why it's 2 times sodium. So sodium usually is what, 145 milliequivalents? So if you multiply 2 times 145, it's usually 280. So this is the main driver by far. And we can calculate that. But now let's say you throw in a weird osmol that's not measured. It's not sodium, it's not PUN, it's not glucose. It is ethylene glycol. But now, your calculated osmol will stay at 300, right? That's not going to change much. But if you measure it with an osmometer, that we don't do that, you can do that in a human hospital, your measured osmolarity will be like 350, 360 because you have that ethylene glycol there contributing to the equation. Make sense? And so that makes a gap. Yeah? So if you're very drunk, they will also measure your osmol because alcohol is an osmol too. And they will pump your stomach, just like ethylene glycol. Is that bad for us when you do it in excess? So in human medicine, they do run a lot more measure osmolarity if you're drunk or you're that dumb and drink ethylene glycol. Right, and then most of the time we do the anion gap. And I don't know how relevant this is for you guys. I don't know if you've heard of this before. What is anion gap? Yes. Right, so there's 2 choices. You have to know first that anion gap works if you have a metabolic acidosis. So you need a metabolic acidosis, and what anion gap does is say, can I identify the source of this metabolic acidosis. So if you don't have an acidosis, you don't have an iron gap, right? If you don't have metabolic acidosis, so our respiratory acidosis wouldn't work for this. So if you have metabolic acidosis, you identified, okay, pH is 7.2, bicarb is 12. Both are low, metabolic acidosis by definition. Now I'm going to say the two choices with iron gap would be hyperchloremic or normochloremic. And how does that work? Well, there's always a gap because we, humans, measure less anions in the blood than cations. So it doesn't really exist. In reality, there's always electron neutrality. Your blood will have the same amount of cations and anions, otherwise you would be charged. We're not charged, we're grounded. So the machine itself will read less anions, so there's always a gap, always. And that normal anion gap will be 12 to 15, meaning I'm measuring less anions than cations, all right? The main things that we measure, that we do measure, would be bicarb and chloride. Those are the two main anions that we measure. And we say those should equal potassium and sodium that are measured cations, right? And if you do the math, you realize that it doesn't level off. It would be like 144 equals 128 plus the ones that we don't measure, plus the anion gap, and then it equals, okay? That's how it works. Now let's say you have an acidosis. This is where we put it to work. Bicarb is 12. We have an acidosis, right? It's not 24, it's 12. But in this case, my chloride came up to compensate for that. Right? So that's hyperchloremic metabolic acidosis. I measured chloride. So my anion gap stays the same. But if I have a metabolic acidosis, here, bicarb 12, and my chloride is low or normal, then something else has to be contributing to electron neutrality, and that's an unmeasured anion. In this case, it could be an ethylene glycol molecule, or one of its acids. So if you have an elevated anion gap metabolic acidosis, and you have a suspicion that it got into ethylene glycol, you could be like, that's probably the ethylene glycol there. An unmeasured anion, I don't have a way to measure it, is increasing my gap. This is something that you have to revise and revise until you get it in your head.
You're saying like, well, we can't have metabolic acidosis.
The metabolic acidosis is defined by a low bicarb. So these two have low bicarb. But one of them is compensating by increasing the chloride, which you can measure, i.e. normal anion gap. The other one didn't compensate at all, right? The chloride is actually normal or low. So then why is it acidotic? It's not because of hyperchloremia. It's because there's another acid there that I'm not measuring that will elevate my anion gap. So I can do this with sodium chloride. With 0.9% chloride in a patient, you give it for 2-3 days, you will induce a metabolic acidosis that's hyperchloremic. Normal anion gap. This is ethylene glycol. What other anion do I not measure? We could, but we don't rarely measure, that can give you a high anion gap acidosis. Lactate is the other one. So a patient in shock with high lactic acidosis will give you a high anion gap too. And a patient with ethylene glycol toxicosis and vomiting and puking could have a high lactate and ethylene glycol. So the anion gap could be huge, right? You don't really know exactly which anion is there. You just know it's elevated. Confusing. You might need it for your boards. Hopefully the diagram is a good one to explain anion gap, because it took me like 3 years to get this. Or more. I don't remember. I have my sources. The good thing is that if you print out a blood gas, this is from a blood gas release, you will do it for you. The machine just does it. You don't have to measure it. This is just for boards, really. But I just want you guys to know where the heck it came from. conceptually, more than anything. All right. Treatment. So we said that we can actually give fomepizole, 4-MP, and it will competitively inhibit this enzyme. So if you give it early, like this puppy that lapped up the ethylene glycol, is healthy still, came to you because the owner is very attentive, brought the puppy into your clinic, great. So at that puppy I might give some charcoal, geranium, and then start this fomepizole. And there's a protocol for that. You have to open plums, you have to work with it. And the owner would be like, but he's normal, why am I spending $1,000? It's because if you don't, you're gonna get renal failure, and it's gonna be irreversible. So fomepizole works great if the animal ingested it fairly recently. It doesn't work great if there's renal failure. Make sense? Because of this slew of steps in the chemical reaction, and these steps is fairly fast, unfortunately. However, you can use ethanol. Ethanol is alcohol. So you can have vodka in your clinic, literally, a bottle of vodka, you don't have to filter it, and you can inject it to the patient. Obviously, that has a lot more problems. Because what it's doing is competing with that enzyme. Right now you have ethanol in the blood and a bunch of vodka. And both of them are competing for the same enzyme. So the animal is going to be super drunk, like abnormally drunk, and you might need to obviously deal with the airway, breathing, circulation part of it. It's definitely a lot less expensive than fomepizole, and some criticals feel that it might work better with cats. I don't like having a drunk cat in the ICU, but you know, if it's going to save them, let's give it a try. So there's also protocols for that. Protocol for vodka, 2 mL per kg for the cat, 5 mL per kg for the doctor. Q4. I'm making that up totally. So when you see like vodka in the treatment room, that don't think bad about that clinic. There's a reason. Any questions with ethylene glycol? Again, I'm just shooting for big concepts here. I'm not telling you I'm not going to make you an expert at treating the next ethylene glycol, but it would be like key things that will jump out of you the next time when you do hopefully see one of these. And hopefully you see them early. You got to jump all over them. The same with racing and grape toxicity. Jump all over them fast when they're healthy. When you already see the renal damage, it's going to be too late. Yes? No. The level of that enzyme? No, I don't. And I don't think they do in human medicine. They measure the level of alcohol, but not the enzyme. Aminoglycosides. What's the biggest one that we use in clinics? Amikacin. By far, that's the one. Amikacin is a effing great antibiotic. Why? Because we don't use it. And if we don't use an antibiotic, even if it's old school, guess what? Bacteria, you won't have bacterial resistance. So for nasty, ironically, UTIs, you use amikacin. Obviously, after you have a culture. So unfortunately, you need to use it sometimes. You have to embrace it. It's a gram-negative antibiotic. It's freaking amazing. Like, it can kill like everything that is gram-negative. But it will have side effects. Why is that? Well, this compound makes it right through GFR into the proximal tubules. And this is the urinary side, okay? Anything that's apical will face like the urine. Or anything that's basolateral will face the bloodstream. Okay, so the capillaries. I just want you to know how this thing works, polarity here. So when they say brush border, is this area here to the lumen of the urine. Okay? Same with, I can put an enterocyte here, enterocyte, GI. This would be ingesta, and this would be to the capillary. always, basolateral always is here. So you will always have the APPA pump in the basolateral membrane, that's how it is. Alright, so this thing comes filtered, the aminoglycoside, makes it to the proximal tubules, and those high dosage, then it messes with the lysosomes, and now you have damage, real damage to the proximal tubules. And I'm not going to go into detail, just take it from me. It does a lot of damage to the proximal tubules, they swell up, they plug up the tubular flow, you get renal failure. And it's pretty much unreversible. Now I said earlier that as long as you have a basolateral membrane intact, or a basement membrane, there is hope that you can regenerate if you take obviously away the amikacin and you treat the renal failure. So if you need to use amikacin, you should do serial daily UAs. Why is the UA more specific than a BUN and creatinine? Because that's where the aminoglycoside is ending, in the urine, right? So what are you going to see if you start getting signs of toxicity, renal toxicity? You're going to start seeing casts. Cells are going to be sloughing off into the tubules. Normal BUN and normal creatinine, happy dog, but you start seeing casts. And yesterday there were no casts. You know, you get it, that's more sensitive than waiting for the BUN to go up and the creatinine. And then, oh, by the way, the UA shows a bunch of casts. So that's how you monitor for amikacin toxicity. And the owner can do this at home. So on a free catch, some of these patients have to go home with amikacin for 2 weeks, and the owners inject it once a day, and then they check the free catch urine with a stick at least to measure for protein or the esterase, like the leukocytes and stuff like that. But ideally, you do this in